Hi, it's Juliet. Welcome to my studio. All right, so now I'm going to install my ribber, and this is a 1917 Gearhart. It's got this little pin, and I made a pink mark here, and that corresponds to the pink mark there. And I want this pin just to be a little bit to the right side, so that when it goes down, there's a little rib or fin in there, which is what holds it in place. So I'm going to put this guy in, get it in the right place. This other pin needs to be aligned, and then I need to take my little set screw here. Let's see, righty tighty. So I've got to get the ribber height adjusted. So I want to set my gap just right. That's about where my machine likes it to be. Let me tighten this set screw here. Okay, so that's how my ribber likes to be. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're going to set up 3x1 rib on the back half. So I'm going to get my ribber needles, and I'm going to open them as I put them in, and I'm going to go from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So the first one past 3 o'clock is this guy here, and I'm going to do every other one. It's not 1x1 rib, it's 3x1 rib. So there'll be 3 stitches on the cylinder and 1 stitch on the ribber. So first I'm going to put all my ribber needles in, and oops, I lost one. I'm going to have the latches open because it'll make it easier to hang the stitches than to try to have to battle an open latch too. That one's closed, so we'll open it. Okay, so the next step is to use my hook, and this is a double eye needle, and part of it has just been cut away to make it a nice little hook here. A handy thing. I think I learned about this from the Colorado Cranker. She has a YouTube channel too. It's the handiest little thing. So what I'm going to do is I need to transfer the stitches from the main bed up to the ribber bed, and I'll show you one or two, and I'll come back when it's done. So what I usually do is I push it out a little bit with my fingernail. I go in behind it. I grab it with the open hook end. I lift the stitch over the needle, and then I put it on the ribber.
This is the thing.
Okay, so as you can see, I have all of the stitches transferred from the cylinder up to the ribber bed. So I have a 3x1, which means that I've got 3 stitches on the cylinder, then 1 on the ribber, 3 on the cylinder, 1 on the ribber. And I always go around and I kind of feel it with my hand to make sure I didn't accidentally leave one in on the cylinder. If you do, once you realize it, you can always take this stitch off of that, transfer it up to the closest ribber, and then get rid of it. So it's easier to check it now than have to deal with that later. Okay, so now we're at the point where we're doing the body of the foot. So I've got the 3x1 rib on the top and plain on the bottom, because generally you don't want rib on the bottom of the feet because it can be uncomfortable. And I need to knit 40 rows. So I have an electronic row counter. So there's a little magnet here on my yarn feeder, and it passes around this little yellow guy here, and it trips my counter. So I'm going to just knit 40 rows now. So 40. So I want to go around here, and I'm going to stop right about at this point here where my ribber gives me full access to the needles on that side of the cylinder. So I haven't quite gotten my yarn carrier around to the 3 o'clock position yet, but I'm going to stop at about 6 o'clock. And so now the next step is I'm going to park my ribber needles into my cylinder, and I'm going to remove my ribber, and I'm going to do the heel shaping, and it's going to be done on the side closest to me. So to park them, I take the stitches, I push them forward. The stitch is going to go behind the latch, which is okay. I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to just tuck that nose, the hook, back down behind my cylinder spring, and that's going to hold it in place. And these needle butts are sticking up a bit, but it's not going to interfere with the mechanism. At least on this old Gearhart it isn't. So I'm going to just transfer all of these. I want to make sure you're transferring them into the into the blank cylinder. Sometimes you can get a little crossed up there. I've done that before. So I'm going to just continue to put the hook part behind the spring. That gets them out of the way, and I can take my cylinder off, or excuse me, my ribber off, and gives me more working room. So now I need to get my little Allen wrench here, and I got to loosen this, just that direction. And I can lift my rubber completely out of the way, and now I can see what I'm doing for the heel sheeping. So since I'm going to be working the heel in here, this back side I need to raise all of the stitches. I'm not doing a deep heel, so I'm only working from 3 o'clock through 6 to 9. So anything on the back side I'm going to raise into non-working position. And you can see the parked cylinder stitches, excuse me, the parked ribber needles are down lower, but they're fine. Nothing's going to knit, and they're just going to kind of hang out there while I do the stitch. I need to move it a little bit more. That last guy can't come up. Okay, there we go. And again, I'm going to open these up so that I don't have the latches sticking out, because sometimes it can get snagged in that little slot in the yarn carrier, and I don't want to bend one. All right. Now we're ready to do the heel shaping. The heel shaping is very much like the toe shaping in that I'm going to do my decreases by raising one on the side of the yarn carrier and bringing it down until I get 12 stitches remaining, which are these 2 green marks. And then I'm going to increase by raising 1 and lowering 2, just how we did the toe. Okay, so now I'm doing the heel shaping. So I'm going to bring it around here, and I'm going to just raise 1 and bring it back. And as before, sometimes I need to lift off a bit. I can usually get a couple of rows in here before I need to hang whites. Now, since there's a cylinder, a ribber needle parked here, you can see how that yarn is kind of going in that corner. When I'm bringing this back over, I'm pulling this up. I want to make sure that it's not snagging in there, that it comes completely out. And I want to make sure the lycra comes completely out too. So that one is lifted and it auto-wrapped it, so that's all goodness. And you can see I'm kind of pushing down on the inside here to make sure these knit off, so I can get a row or 2 before I need to hang the weights in there. All right, I think I'm going to have to hang the weights in a second. And as before, I'm going to go a couple of needles in from the edge and then hang them down maybe 3/4 of an inch. All right, so my ribber weights are hung, so I'm going to continue with the raise 1 on the side of the yarn carrier and just repeat back and forth until I'm down to 12 stitches. And then I will continue. Now, if I had been doing a deep heel, I probably would have had 1 or possibly 2 less stitches on the ribber. And so I started with the one that was close, and it was every other one on the ribber. So you may need to index over by 1 if you're doing a deep heel, so that you don't have a ribber stitch parked beyond the 3 o'clock, or before the 3 o'clock, or after the 9 o'clock. That way you can do your deep heel. So for this one, I'm not doing a deep heel because these socks are for my daughter, and the way her foot's shaped, she doesn't want the deep heel. So I'm just doing a regular heel. So I'm feeling like I need to move these weights up a little bit at this point. I also have my hand on the underside. I'm kind of holding the weights over towards the center a little bit, which kind of helps a little bit. So as long as I don't need my second hand to help lift the yarn, and my yarn carrier is working okay, then I can get away with that. Okay, so I'm at my last one here. So I'm going to raise 1, and rather than putting 2 down, I'm only going to put 1 down on this first one. We'll pretend that one's already down. That way I can kind of keep them balanced. And so now I'm on the increasing because I'll get down to my 12. So I'm going to raise 1 on this side and 2 down over on this side. And we're going to just continue on with our heel shaping. So 1 up next to the carriage, 2 down opposite. 1 up next to 2 down opposite. And again, I'm frequently checking to make sure that these latches on this backside are not sticking out so they don't snag that slot on the slotted carrier. If you don't have a slotted carrier, that's not a concern. But we all know these machines need to be watched like hawks. And then I'm going to put my ribber back on, take my park needles, put them back up on the ribber. I'm going to do 1.5 rounds, and then I'm going to set up the whole thing for 1 by 1 rib. So let me do this last one here. 1 up, 2 down, part way around. I'm going in the right direction for my ribber. May have gone a little bit too far with that. We'll see. So now I'm going to lower all of these stitches that had been up in hold on the back side, and I'm going to reinstall my ribber. All right, so now I'm going to put my ribber, same deal as before. Got the little slot in the pink, wanted to go just on that side. My little holders all the way over here. I probably went a bit too far with my carrier, but we'll see. Okay, put that in. It hits against the little fin, so we're in a good position. Let me get my set screw in here. And for this style ribber, 1917, though it's an early Gearhart, early-ish, I've got to lift it up just the right height, which it likes to be right around there. Oopsie, it slipped. Tighten that up. That looks good. The height it needs to be up depends on the thickness of the yarn. And each machine's a bit different. It depends on how my yarn carrier is adjusted. Okay, so now I need to take these ribber stitches. I'm going to push 2 things out so it loosens the spring. I can get that needle out from behind there. I'm going to take my double-eyed tool, and this time I'm using the end that just has the eye on it. I'm going to get that stitch, which is behind the latch, back into the latch, and I'm going to place the butt down on the ribber. And you know, there's just enough length of the latch so we don't lose it. I'm going to go around and put them all into place, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I've got all of the ribber needles put back except for one. As I mentioned before, I didn't stop my carriage soon enough. I went an inch past. So this last guy I can't put up because this thingy's in the way in the tappet plate. But that's okay. What's going to happen, it's going to knit and it's going to put a loop on top of it, and then we can kind of deal with that. So I'm going to just knit, because remember I said I have this 1.5 rows before I set up for 1 by 1 rib. So you can probably see it kind of knit here. And it just knit over the top of it, which is okay. I'm going to put that stitch below that little needle butt sticking out. And then we're going to handle that in a second. So I'm going to just get this around, all those knitted the normal way. And before this gets in the way, I'm going to stop here. So now, it went around, and you can see that because this needle butt was sitting here, it just hooked this yarn that came around. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to just lower that down below the needle butt of that ribber needle. And now I need to get that ribber needle up to here. So as before, I'm going to push the stitches out to loosen where its point is in the spring there. And then I'm going to take this and transfer the stitches onto it. Now, because the ribber needle wasn't in place, it didn't actually knit that stitch. So this is a stitch that didn't get knit. So I'm going to just manually knit that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to get the old stitch behind there, and the new stitch is going to be in the latch. So I just basically manually knitted that stitch. The ribber didn't do it because I advanced a little bit too far. And so now it's the thing is behind the latch, and I can get my needle butt down. And nobody knows it didn't actually knit, and I didn't stop in time. So you can do that for 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever you need to do. So you just kind of manually stitch what it didn't do. Okay, so I have the back half all transferred, and I have every single ribber in work and every other needle on the cylinder. And so now I'm going to advance the carriage partway so that I can do the apply all of the ribber needles in the front. So I'm going to go advance to here. So that last little bit's out of the way right there. Now I can get out all of these, and I'm going to transfer all of those, and I will be back in a moment. So I did the half a row, and I took care of this one stitch on the end here, and I'm going to do a second one, and I'm starting my second one, but I'm going to stop right here before I get to it. And so I now can manipulate all of these stitches on this back side of the ribber. And so now I want to put, so I'm setting up for 1 by 1 rib, I need to get a needle into every single slot. So I'm going to start on the back half, and I'm going to put the needles in, and I'm going to make sure that the latches are open when I put them in. It'll just make the transferring easier. And I will be back in a moment when I have all of these needles in and the stitches transferred from the cylinder up to the ribber. It's the exact same process we used before. It's just every other, or other every one. Okay, so I have the back half all transferred, and I have every single ribber in work and every other needle on the cylinder. And so now I'm going to advance the carriage partway so that I can do the apply all of the ribber needles in the front. So I'm going to go advance to here. So that last little bit's out of the way right there. Now I can get out all of these, and I'm going to transfer all of those, and I will be back in a moment. Okay, so those 2 rows that we did before we set up the 1 by 1 rib is like your post heel. So since we're doing toe up, you have a post heel, as opposed to if you do cuff down, you have a pre heel. So functionally, it's the same thing. See, there's a little stitch there that I split. There we go. Okay, so now I'm at the point where I'm at the leg. I'm going to go up the leg, and I need to do 25 rows. So I'm going to reset my row counter, and that finishes my post heel, and my thing will come around. Move this in so it measures. Okay, so we're at row 25, so I'm going to come around, and I'm going to stop as soon as the latch on the last stitch before 3 o'clock closes. And now I'm going to transfer over to waste yarn. I want to leave about 1 yard length on my knitting yarn, because we're going to use that for casting off. So that's about that much. I'm going to cut my lycra here at the machine. I'm going to kind of separate it here, my cobweb lycra, because you don't really need the lycra in your cast off thread. It's easier to just kind of get it out of the way now. And I will unwind that and get that out of the way. And the next step is to pull this down to the underside and to get my waste yarn to the underside. So I have another ball of yarn. I recycle the yarn, I'll reuse that. I got a little yarn ball on the floor there that I will use. I'm going to pull this thing out of the feeder. Yeah, the cat will help guard it. All right, I'm just going to move that across the machine. I'm going to set my waste yarn up. And I will have another video about how I do the cast off from the waste yarn. It involves putting it on the needles, but it's a real simple process. I like it much better than Kitchener. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this really long handle latch tool, and I'm going to go up from the underside, and I want it to come out right at my 3 o'clock mark. So you just reach in. I usually put my finger in here, and I just kind of guide it up. So there it is. Kind of wedges in there, and it kind of stays on its own. And so I'm going to grab the tail end of my knitting yarn and the tail end of my waste yarn. I'm going to just manually put them into that hook and close the latch. Just manually going to close it, and then I'm going to reach down below and just pull it down in between the ribber and the cylinder to get these tails out on the lower side. All right, so it's down on the bottom side. Let me pull my knitting yarn through. So I have my waste yarn and my project yarn down below the cylinder. And then I'm just going to put this properly in the yarn feeder. Okay, so that we should be ready to knit. All right, and it's just 1 by 1 rib, just using my waste yarn, and I want to put about an inch and a half on there. Just keep knitting until the yarn is gone and it comes off the cylinder. There we go. And we have our big weight here. You see it? Which I'm going to take off. Put that on the floor. And we have this hanger, so I'm going to squeeze that together. Remember how it was in that little metal thing, and get it off of there and just kind of take it out. It springs back open. Put that away, and then we have that little metal disc in here, which we can kind of slide through, and out it comes. And there we have it. And you can see where I've transitioned over to the 1 by 1 rib for the waste yarn. And I will show you how to do the cast off in another video. You can see I've got the nice 3 by 1 rib on top, and it transitions over. I've got a couple of rows, post-heel rows. It's sort of like the pre-heel if you're going this direction, but it's a post-heel if you're going this way. And transition to the 1 by 1 rib. We have no holes. And if I turn it inside out, where we did that cast on, this beginning loop here, it's already been E-wrapped in a couple of times, so I could just clip that. Usually I just put it in and out along one of those, but I really don't have any finishing to do at the toes, and I have no kitchen ring. I'll show you that cast off momentarily.